In the history of aerospace, few companies have changed the rules as completely as Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, better known as SpaceX. Welcome to Starfish Audiobooks, where complex systems, bold ideas, and real-world innovation are explained clearly. Today, we explore the story behind one of the most extraordinary companies of the modern age. So sit back, relax, put on your headphones, and enjoy this audiobook. Founded in 2002 by Elon Musk, a software entrepreneur with no formal background in rocketry, SpaceX began as a small, often mocked startup working out of a warehouse in California. But within just 2 decades, it would grow into the dominant force in global space launch, operate the largest satellite constellation ever built, and become a critical pillar of Western access to space. By late 2025, the company was valued at nearly $400 billion, a transformation few believed was possible. This audiobook offers a deep, detailed journey through SpaceX's evolution, from a failed attempt to buy old Russian missiles to the rise of the massive Starship rocket. We'll explore the company's engineering philosophy of rapid, hardware-driven testing, its strategy of building everything in-house, and its growing role in military and intelligence operations through programs like Starshield. We'll also follow its financial roller coaster, from standing on the edge of bankruptcy in 2008 to becoming one of the most valuable private companies on Earth. This is not just a company story. It's a case study in high-risk engineering, industrial competition, and relentless iteration. It's the story of how SpaceX dismantled the old space monopolies, funded its Mars ambitions through a global satellite internet network, and became NASA's primary partner for returning humans to the moon. This is the story of how SpaceX was built. To understand how SpaceX began, we have to go back to a time when the company did not even exist, and the idea of a private rocket company sounded almost unrealistic. The origin of SpaceX did not begin with a commercial business plan or a strategy to launch satellites. It began with an idea meant to inspire. After selling PayPal in 2002 and earning around $180 million, Elon Musk started looking at NASA's long-term plans for Mars. What he found shocked him. There was no clear roadmap for sending humans to the Red Planet. So Musk came up with a strange but powerful concept called Mars Oasis. The goal was not colonization, it was symbolism. The plan was to land a small robotic greenhouse on Mars. Inside it, seeds suspended in nutrient gel would be hydrated after landing, and plants would begin growing in Martian soil. The image of green life on a red planet was meant to capture global attention and pressure governments to take Mars exploration seriously again. The project budget was about $20 million. But there was one massive problem. Launching anything into space was incredibly expensive. American rockets at the time cost more than $50 million per launch, more than double the entire budget of the mission. Looking for cheaper options, Musk turned to Russia. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, many old intercontinental ballistic missiles were being converted into orbital launch vehicles. In late 2001 and early 2002, Elon Musk traveled to Moscow to negotiate the purchase of refurbished Dnieper rockets. He was joined by aerospace consultant Jim Cantrell and a college friend, Adio Ressi. The meetings were chaotic. Police stops at gunpoint, bribes to officials, and long negotiations fueled by vodka toasts to space, to America, and to America in space. Real progress was rare. On the third trip, Musk believed he had negotiated a deal for around $7 million per rocket, but when he arrived to finalize the purchase, the Russian lead designer suddenly tripled the price. When Musk resisted, the designer reportedly spat at the Americans and mocked them for not being able to afford real rockets. The meeting ended immediately, and with it, the Mars Oasis project. But that failure triggered something far bigger. On the flight home, while the rest of the team slept, Musk opened his laptop and started doing the math. He broke rockets down to their raw materials: aluminum alloys, titanium, copper, carbon fiber. What he discovered was shocking. The materials made up only about 3% of the cost of a launch vehicle. The remaining 97% came from supply chains, subcontractors, overhead, and inefficient manufacturing. In other words, rockets were expensive not because of physics, but because of how the industry was organized. If someone built everything in-house and designed rockets like products instead of government projects, prices could fall by an order of magnitude. That realization became the foundation of SpaceX. Space Exploration Technologies Corporation was officially incorporated in March of 2002. Elon Musk invested $100 million of his own money, more than half his personal fortune, to fund the company and guarantee salaries for early employees. The goal was simple: attract top engineers who were frustrated with slow, risk-averse aerospace firms. The most important early hire was propulsion engineer Tom Mueller. Mueller built liquid-fuel rocket engines in his garage as a hobby. That hands-on mindset was exactly what Musk wanted. Mueller became vice president of propulsion and the architect of what would later become the Merlin engine family. Other early hires included operations chief Chris Thompson and flight systems expert Hans Koenigsmann. Many established aerospace veterans declined the offer. SpaceX looked risky, and failure in rocketry is never quiet. The company set up its first headquarters in a refurbished warehouse in El Segundo, California. Engineers worked next to welders and machinists. Designers sat beside the people building their parts. This was intentional. By removing corporate layers and physical separation, SpaceX dramatically shortened the loop between design, testing, and redesign. It was the opposite of how traditional aerospace worked, and it set the tone for everything that followed. Turning that idea into reality meant building an actual rocket, and that first attempt would become the most dangerous phase in the company's entire history. SpaceX's first rocket was called Falcon 1. It was designed as the minimum possible system that could still reach orbit. A two-stage vehicle, one Merlin engine on the first stage, one Kestrel engine on the second. Just 21 meters tall and capable of carrying about 670 kilograms to low Earth orbit. The target launch price was $6 to $7 million, a fraction of what other rockets cost at the time. But while Falcon 1 looked simple on paper, building and flying it would become an unforgiving lesson in how hard rocketry truly is. Kwajalein, launching from the middle of the Pacific. SpaceX couldn't get access to major U.S. launch sites. Military schedules at Cape Canaveral and Vandenberg left no room for a startup. So SpaceX was forced to build its own launch base on a tiny island called Amalek, part of the Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands. Everything had to be shipped by boat: liquid oxygen, rocket fuel, equipment. The salty air corroded hardware. The tropical climate made precision work harder. And the engineering teams were operating thousands of kilometers away from their factories in California. It was about as difficult an environment as you could choose to test experimental rockets. 3 launches, 3 failures. The first Falcon 1 launch took place on March 24, 2006. Just 34 seconds after liftoff, the rocket failed. A small corroded fitting on a fuel line had leaked kerosene. That fuel ignited inside the engine bay. The fire severed a helium pressure line, causing the main fuel valve to shut. The engine died, and the rocket fell into the reef. Even more painfully, the payload, a student satellite, was thrown clear and landed intact in a nearby shed. The satellite survived. The mission did not. The second launch in March 2007 went much better. The first stage worked perfectly, but during second stage flight, the rocket began to oscillate. Fuel inside the tank started sloshing violently. The engine intake became exposed, and the Kestrel engine flamed out early. The rocket reached nearly 300 kilometers in altitude, but it did not reach orbital speed. Another failure. The third launch in August 2008 was the most painful. SpaceX had upgraded the engine to a newer, more efficient version, but that improvement created a new problem. After engine shutdown, a small amount of fuel remained in the plumbing. That fuel heated up and produced a brief burst of thrust. During stage separation, the first stage surged forward and collided with the second stage. The upper stage was damaged, lost control, and the rocket failed once again. Musk later said that delaying separation by just 1.5 seconds would have prevented the collision. 3 launches, 3 failures, and almost no money left. 2008, the breaking point. By late 2008, SpaceX was nearly insolvent. The global financial crisis had frozen investment, and Musk had poured most of his remaining fortune into both SpaceX and Tesla, which was also close to collapse. He faced an impossible decision: save one company or divide the remaining money and risk losing both. He chose to split it, a decision he later said nearly caused a nervous breakdown. SpaceX had enough parts for one more rocket, but no money for a 5th attempt. Falcon 1 Flight 4 would decide the company's future. Flight 4 Survival. On September 28, 2008, Falcon 1 launched for the 4th time. Stage separation timing had been adjusted. Everything worked. The first stage shut down at orbital velocity. SpaceX became the first privately funded company to place a liquid-fueled rocket into Earth orbit. Technically, the company had succeeded. Financially, it was still barely alive. Then, just days before Christmas, NASA made its decision. SpaceX was awarded a $1.6 million contract to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. 12 missions, guaranteed revenue. The contract transformed SpaceX overnight, from a struggling startup into a government launch provider. It also validated NASA's gamble on commercial spaceflight. SpaceX had survived, and now it had a future. Surviving Falcon 1 gave SpaceX something far more valuable than success. It gave them a future. And with that future came a much bigger, more ambitious rocket. With Falcon 1 retired after its 5th flight, which launched a Malaysian satellite, SpaceX shifted its full attention to a new rocket, Falcon 9. This medium-lift vehicle was designed to serve 2 purposes: to compete in the commercial market for geostationary communication satellites and to fulfill NASA's commercial resupply services contract to the ISS. Falcon 9 represented a major increase in capability. It used 9 Merlin engines on the first stage. In the earliest version, these engines were arranged in a 3x3 grid. Later versions adopted what SpaceX called the octaweb configuration: 1 engine in the center, surrounded by 8 in a circle. This layout improved both structural strength and manufacturing efficiency. Falcon 9 was also designed with engine-out capability, meaning it could still complete its mission even if 1 or more engines failed during ascent. This level of redundancy was required by NASA for future human-rated missions. NASA's Commercial Orbital Transportation Services program, known as COTS, used a different contracting model than traditional government procurement. Instead of paying for development costs, NASA paid companies only after technical milestones were achieved. SpaceX, along with Orbital Sciences, was selected to provide cargo delivery to the ISS. In May 2012, the Dragon C2 Plus mission successfully berthed with the space station. This marked the first time a privately developed spacecraft performed the complex proximity operations and docking maneuvers that had previously been handled only by national space agencies. After the Space Shuttle was retired in 2011, the United States became dependent on Russian Soyuz rockets to transport astronauts to and from the ISS. To restore domestic crew launch capability, NASA created the Commercial Crew Program. The competition placed SpaceX against Boeing. In 2014, NASA awarded contracts to both companies, $4.2 billion to Boeing for the Starliner spacecraft and $2.6 billion to SpaceX for Crew Dragon. The funding difference reflected NASA's view of Boeing as the lower-risk option and SpaceX as the higher-risk alternative. Despite Falcon 9's early success, the vehicle suffered two major failures that forced significant redesigns. The first occurred during the CRS-7 mission on June 28, 2015. The rocket disintegrated 139 seconds after liftoff. The investigation traced the cause to a single steel strut inside the second-stage liquid oxygen tank. The strut, supplied by a subcontractor, was used to secure a helium pressure vessel in place. Although it was rated to withstand 10,000 pounds of force, it failed at just 2,000 pounds due to a metallurgical defect. When the strut broke, the helium vessel shot upward inside the tank, causing the liquid oxygen tank to overpressurize and rupture. The failure destroyed the vehicle, eliminated a docking adapter destined for the ISS, and delayed the launch schedule. The second failure occurred on September 1, 2016, during a pre-flight static fire test on the launch pad. While the rocket was being fueled, it exploded, destroying both the vehicle and the $200 million Amos-6 satellite, which was owned by Facebook. The investigation revealed a complex interaction between super-chilled liquid oxygen and the carbon fiber overwrapped pressure vessels used to store helium. The liquid oxygen had cooled enough to solidify inside the folds of the vessel liner. When the tank was pressurized, the friction between the carbon fibers and the solid oxygen caused ignition. This solid oxygen ignition mechanism had not been observed before in rocketry. As a result, SpaceX redesigned its pressure vessels and modified its fueling procedures, adopting what became known as the load-and-go approach. But reaching orbit was not enough. To truly change the economics of space, SpaceX would have to do something no one had industrialized before: bring rockets back. SpaceX's most significant contribution to aerospace engineering was the industrialization of rocket reusability. Before Falcon 9, rocket stages were treated as expendable hardware and discarded into the ocean after a single flight. Musk compared this practice to throwing away a Boeing 747 after one trip from New York to London. The first steps toward landing rockets began with a test vehicle called Grasshopper. Grasshopper was a vertical takeoff, vertical landing demonstrator tested at SpaceX's McGregor, Texas facility. It consisted of a Falcon 9 fuel tank, a single Merlin engine, and fixed landing legs. In September 2012, Grasshopper performed its first hop to a height of 1.8 meters. In December, it reached 40 meters. In June 2013, it flew to 325 meters. In October 2013, its final flight reached 744 meters. These tests validated the throttle control and engine gimbaling systems required to hover and land a rocket stage. Between 2013 and 2015, SpaceX tested landing maneuvers during real orbital missions over the open ocean. During the Cassiope mission in September 2013, the booster attempted an engine restart for re-entry. The stage lost control, but the engine restart sequence was successfully demonstrated. During the CRS-3 mission in April 2014, the booster achieved a controlled soft landing in the ocean. The stage tipped over and was destroyed by waves, but telemetry confirmed that precise landing control was possible. Moving from ocean landings to solid surfaces proved to be extremely difficult. Several attempts ended in what SpaceX referred to as rapid unscheduled disassemblies. During the CRS-5 mission in January 2015, the booster reached the drone ship, just read the instructions, but ran out of hydraulic fluid for its grid fins. It crashed into the deck and exploded. During the CRS-6 mission in April 2015, the booster reached the drone ship and touched down, but it had too much sideways velocity. The stage tipped over and exploded after impact. Success finally came on December 21, 2015, during the Orbcomm OG-2 mission. Instead of landing on a drone ship, SpaceX received approval to land the booster back on land at Cape Canaveral's Landing Zone 1. The booster touched down intact, producing a sonic boom that marked the beginning of operational reusable rocketry. Several months later, on April 8, 2016, during the CRS-8 mission, SpaceX achieved the first successful landing on a drone ship at sea named Of Course I Still Love You. This capability was essential for missions to geostationary transfer orbit, where the booster does not have enough fuel to return to the launch site. Falcon Heavy, which consisted of 3 Falcon 9 cores strapped together, faced years of delays and skepticism. Critics labeled it a paper rocket. On February 6, 2018, the vehicle completed its demonstration flight. The payload was Elon Musk's personal Midnight Cherry Tesla Roadster, driven by a mannequin in a spacesuit named Starman. The Tesla's dashboard display read, "Don't Panic," a reference to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the stereo played David Bowie's Space Oddity on repeat. The 2 side boosters returned to Cape Canaveral and landed simultaneously. The center core failed to land on the drone ship due to depletion of TETEB ignition fluid. However, the upper stage successfully placed the Roadster into a heliocentric orbit that crosses the orbit of Mars. The vehicle remains in space, serving as an artificial satellite of the Sun. Reusable rockets reduced costs, but they were still not enough to pay for interplanetary ambitions. So SpaceX made a surprising move. It became an internet company. To support the massive cost of colonizing Mars, SpaceX shifted toward becoming a telecommunications provider. Starlink was designed as a large constellation of thousands of low Earth orbit satellites, intended to deliver low-latency, high-bandwidth internet worldwide. Development of Starlink began in earnest in 2015. The first prototype satellites, Tintin-A and Tintin-B, were launched in 2018. Operational deployment started in May 2019 with the launch of a group of 60 satellites that drew immediate attention from astronomers and regulators. The expansion of the network followed a rapid growth curve. In 2021, the service exited beta with approximately 10,000 users. In 2022, subscriber numbers reached 1 million. By 2024, the user base grew to 4 million, with annual revenue reaching $7.7 billion. By late 2025, Starlink served approximately 9 million subscribers across 155 markets, with projected annual revenue exceeding $11 billion. The use of Starlink by Ukrainian forces during the Russian invasion of Ukraine demonstrated the strategic value of resilient satellite communications in low Earth orbit. In response, SpaceX established Starshield, a business unit dedicated to government and defense customers. In 2021, Starshield secured a classified $1.8 billion contract with the National Reconnaissance Office to build a surveillance satellite network. By 2025, this effort evolved into MILNET, a partnership with the United States Space Force to deploy 480 satellites. These satellites use optical intersatellite links, or lasers, to form a secure mesh network in orbit. This architecture reduces reliance on ground stations and increases resistance to jamming and anti-satellite weapon systems. While Starlink funded the present, SpaceX was quietly building for a much larger future, a vehicle designed not just for orbit, but for the Moon, Mars, and beyond. Starship represents the final stage of SpaceX's development philosophy. It is a fully reusable, stainless steel, super heavy launch system designed to refuel in orbit. It is also the largest flying vehicle ever constructed. Development at SpaceX's Starbase facility in South Texas followed a rapid hardware-driven testing approach often described as build, fly, crash, and fix. The first test vehicle, called Starhopper, flew in 2019. It resembled a water tower mounted on legs and reached an altitude of 150 meters. Between 2020 and 2021, SpaceX conducted a series of high-altitude flight tests using prototypes labeled SN8 through SN11. These flights reached altitudes between 10 and 12 kilometers and demonstrated the belly flop aerodynamic descent maneuver. Prototypes SN8, SN9, and SN10 crashed or exploded during landing attempts. On May 5, 2021, prototype SN15 completed the first successful high-altitude flight and achieved a controlled soft landing. This flight validated both Raptor engine performance and the flip and burn landing sequence. Full-stack testing of the integrated Starship system, consisting of the Super Heavy booster and Starship upper stage, began in 2023. The first integrated flight test, IFT-1, launched on April 20, 2023. The vehicle cleared the launch tower but experienced multiple engine failures. Stage separation did not occur and the vehicle began tumbling. The launch termination system was activated but took longer than expected to destroy the vehicle. The launch also damaged the concrete pad, sending debris across a wide area around the launch site. By June 2024, the fourth integrated flight test, IFT-4, achieved the first successful splashdown of both stages. The upper stage survived atmospheric re-entry, even as plasma burned through a hinge on one of the flaps, which was captured on live video. On October 13, 2024, IFT-5 demonstrated a new method for recovery of the booster. The Super Heavy booster returned to the launch site and was captured in mid-air by the launch tower arms, commonly known as the chopsticks or mechazilla. This method removed the need for landing legs on the booster, reducing vehicle mass. During 2025, SpaceX increased the frequency of test flights to accelerate system maturity. IFT-6, flown on November 19, 2024, aborted the booster catch due to communication issues with the tower. However, the upper stage successfully demonstrated in-space engine relight, a requirement for controlled deorbit burns. IFT-7 on January 16, 2025, successfully achieved booster capture. However, the upper stage suffered a fire in the aft section during ascent caused by a propellant leak and was destroyed during flight. IFT-8 on March 6, 2025, again achieved booster capture. However, Ship 34 was lost due to hardware failure in a second-stage engine. IFT-9 on May 27, 2025, lost the upper stage due to a pressurization failure. The booster, however, executed a controlled flip maneuver. IFT-10 on August 26, 2025, completed a full mission profile. The booster splashed down in the ocean as planned for this test. The upper stage completed a full suborbital trajectory, deployed simulated Starlink payloads, relit engines in space, and performed a controlled splashdown in the Indian Ocean. At the same time, SpaceX was no longer just launching satellites. It was carrying people and changing how human spaceflight itself was done. On May 30th, 2020, Crew Dragon Endeavour launched on the Demo 2 mission, carrying NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken to the International Space Station. This ended a 9-year period during which the United States had no domestic capability to launch humans into orbit and relied entirely on Russian Soyuz spacecraft. The mission marked a major success for NASA's Commercial Crew Program and strengthened SpaceX's position relative to Boeing, whose Starliner program continued to experience software and valve problems. In September 2024, the Polaris Dawn mission advanced the limits of private human spaceflight. The mission was funded and commanded by billionaire Jared Isaacman and used a modified Crew Dragon spacecraft. The crew reached an apogee of 1,400 kilometers, the highest Earth orbit achieved by humans since the Gemini 11 mission in 1966. On the third day of the mission, Isaacman and mission specialist Sarah Gillis conducted the first commercial spacewalk. Because the Crew Dragon spacecraft does not have an airlock, the entire cabin was depressurized. All 4 crew members, including Anna Menon and Scott Potet, wore pressurized EVA suits, exposing the interior of the spacecraft to the vacuum of space. Sarah Gillis became the youngest person ever to perform a spacewalk. But despite everything SpaceX has achieved, its most difficult challenges are still ahead, and the path to the Moon and Mars remains far from guaranteed. SpaceX holds NASA's contract to provide the human landing system for the Artemis 3 mission, which is intended to return humans to the Moon. This mission depends on orbital refueling, the transfer of cryogenic propellant between Starship vehicles in low Earth orbit. As of late 2025, this capability has not yet been demonstrated at operational scale. The NASA Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel warned that delays in orbital refueling development would likely push the Artemis 3 mission to 2028. As a result, Elon Musk revised expectations for early Mars missions. He described 2026 Mars attempt as a distraction and stated that the focus should remain on building reliable low Earth orbit infrastructure first. The most likely time frame for uncrewed Mars landings has shifted to 2028 or 2030. SpaceX's financial valuation reflects its position in the market. In 2015, the company was valued at $12 billion. In 2020, the valuation rose to $46 billion. By 2024, it reached $350 billion. In 2025, tender offers valued the company at approximately $400 billion. This valuation is driven primarily by the high-margin revenue from Starlink and by the strategic importance of SpaceX's launch capabilities. From a failed rocket deal in Moscow to dominating the global launch industry, the rise of SpaceX has followed a path few would have predicted. It has achieved what was once considered impossible. It transformed rocketry from a slow, government-dominated activity into a competitive commercial industry. Through Falcon 9, it made reusability routine. Through Starlink, it created a revenue engine capable of funding its own research and development. Through Starship, it is attempting to build a system designed not just to reach orbit, but to make travel throughout the solar system practical. The journey from a failed rocket negotiation in Moscow to catching boosters in mid-air in Texas has been defined by a willingness to accept failure and by decisions driven by physics rather than tradition. Whether this approach can overcome the fundamental limits of rocketry and enable a permanent human presence beyond Earth will be decided in the coming decade. But regardless of what happens next, SpaceX has already changed how humanity reaches space. And that legacy is permanent. Thank you for listening to this audiobook on Starfish Audiobooks. We appreciate you spending this time with us, and we look forward to exploring more stories of how extraordinary systems are built.